not quite 1/4 and never just half, but the entirety of one primate, whole. It is the part of a story, an idea that means more to you than me. Hello and welcome to Full Gorilla Life. We are Jeremy Keene,
Larry Medina, and Corey Hewlings.
Each week, we will break down an important life concept or talk with an inspiring person so that you can live your full gorilla life.
All right, we'd like to welcome everybody back to the podcast. Today, we have a great opportunity to have a great guest on our show. It is Danielle Randall. And Danielle, she is a personal and professional development expert as well as an author. And she makes me feel like I have a lot to do left, right? Like I haven't done enough. But before we get into everything that she does and
has done.
Yep.
Cool.
Before we do that, we'll go ahead and get
Sure.
started with the Gorilla Gauntlet.
So welcome. Glad to have you on.
Thank
So the
you.
Gorilla Gauntlet, 10 rapid fire. Pass it or not, your choice. So
Pass.
ready?
Go ahead.
Married or single?
Married.
Any children?
Yes.
iPhone or Android?
iPhone.
Favorite movie or book?
You could say your own.
Come on, you can say it.
That's fair.
We
That is
don't-
definitely fair.
We won't judge you.
No,
Yeah,
not at
no.
all.
Pass.
Okay.
Okay.
Favorite genre of music?
Disco.
Oh.
Okay.
All right.
Beer, whiskey, or wine?
Whiskey.
Nice. Reservations or just walk in?
Both.
Okay.
Okay.
I like it. Favorite type of food?
Japanese.
What do you drive?
I drive a Jeep Wrangler.
Like Japanese, like
Yeah, let's get into this a
Okay.
minute.
Japanese.
Sushi.
We're foodies. Okay, sushi. That's what I was gonna ask.
What's
Like-
your favorite roll?
Tuna.
Tuna? Okay.
Avocado.
Okay. Nothing. Yeah.
So you like the raw fish side of it? Like,
I do.
Okay.
What do you think of poke?
I like it.
It's pretty good.
What is poke?
Okay. Ceviche. Any of those.
It's a lazy
type.
man's sushi.
Mhm.
What is poke?
It's a bowl. It's just like sushi in a bowl.
Oh.
So I mean, that's the,
It's-
that's
I still
the
wouldn't like
easiest
it.
way to do
It's
it.
a
I think.
lazy man's sushi.
I still
But it's
It's
wouldn't
pretty
like it.
tasty.
I'm not
Like a
saying
spicy
it's
ahi
bad.
tuna.
I'm just saying
Okay.
it's just lazy.
Do you have a favorite restaurant around town for sushi?
It's a good
I
question.
like Saigon sushi.
Which one is that?
It's on 14th, across from.
I know
Post
I've
and
heard
Vine.
it. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Across from where?
Across from Post and Vine.
Okay.
Right there in
I'm about to
downtown.
try it out.
Yeah, I like it. They give you a little bit of like a seaweed salad to start, and they make fun things out of the lemons and the straws, and it makes your kid entertained. 'cause
Oh,
they
okay.
have like the lemon looks like a bug.
Okay. Do they have anything besides sushi?
Everything.
Okay.
Thai.
So they do have time.
So you can
Let's
go.
check it out. Yeah.
You get some pad thai,
Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
something that you've been like
Yeah.
kind
Something
of.
spicy.
I like
Okay.
that about the place too, because if I want sushi and someone else wants something else, it gives a variety.
Yeah, my wife likes sushi. I try it almost every time I try it, and every time I don't like it.
What's the one thing you've tried, Corey?
I've tried salmon rolls. I've tried.
Salmon's too strong.
Yeah,
I've
yeah,
tried
start with that.
tuna. I've
Start
tried
with tuna.
Tuna's good.
I've tried tuna.
What about like
I've
crab?
Tried, I've
Like
tried
the
the
California
crab.
roll.
I've
What
tried
about the fried shrimp?
fried shrimp?
And no go?
Okay.
I don't understand it. Fried shrimp smells phenomenal to me when somebody's cooking it. I'm like, oh, that smells phenomenal, and then I eat it. I don't like the texture of it.
Okay.
This isn't a food podcast,
Yeah,
but
but-
I can make it that way. I can make it that way
Yeah.
very
I
quickly.
Yeah.
could too.
Okay.
I'm thinking
All right,
like,
all right,
I'm
so-
like, I love
so-
all seafood. If you really
Yeah.
wanted to know, I just like it all. You can cook it
Yeah.
or not. and
Yeah.
I'm good.
Yeah, no,
That's
yeah.
awesome.
So before we get into more food and things of that nature, maybe we can get a little background, right? So first off, maybe we can just say what brought you to Vero Beach.
So my parents, my dad and my stepmom, retired here. They were snowbirds and they were living in New York. I'm originally from New York. They were visiting me in Maryland, where I was living with my husband and my son, and they were doing it religiously. Like once a month, they'd make the drive, and I really respected that my father said he would know my child, and he made it his business to do so while they were working full-time still. And when they moved to Vero permanently, I had this terrible image of my father driving from, 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 men tend to do things that they think they should do. And he thinks driving's a good idea.
And it's easier. In his
Yeah,
defense,
and
right? Like, I don't have to book a ticket. I just
right.
go.
His idea
Yeah.
of driving, what's driving 2 days? I'm like, it's a long drive, dude. Like,
Yeah.
you've got to get over this. So I just had this image of him doing it. And I had a long-term vision of living near the beach. And truth be told, like, this is the culmination of my own dream, where my sister moved to Florida. She lives in Williston, and she's in the thoroughbred industry. So I really had no interest in living where she lives, because that industry is not something I want to be a part of, like, for work. And she moved 18 years ago, and then from New York, where we both were, and I started dreaming like a bigger dream and saying to myself at some point, like, I want to live by the beach. And this is where it's really interesting. The work I ended up doing helps people dream a bigger dream. And on my drive here, I was really reflecting on the fact that while my dream may not be big enough for some people, I'm living my dream, because at 45, I have my own business. It's location free, which was mandatory in my mind for living by the beach, because I didn't want to be here and be hustling into and out of an office in work clothes. I wanted to have the freedom to enjoy the space I lived in. And it took me a long time to figure it out. It also took me 2 husbands to figure out who would move here.
But you figured
That's
it out.
part of the process.
I
Part of,
did.
Yeah, and,
So-
and
part of the
that's
journey.
key.
Yeah, so that's what brought me here, because they moved and I felt like it would be great to be close to them, and I wanted to fulfill my own dream.
Awesome.
Huh.
So I don't know everything because I got to visit you. I was not able to attend, but I'm curious of kind of a little background of what you do then, kind of in that dream.
They
I don't know if
being Corey and Larry.
Yes.
Jeremy did not show up
Okay.
for whatever
That's one way to
reason.
put it, I guess. Sure.
So yeah. So to Jeremy's point,
That sounded worse than what it was. Jeremy couldn't make it.
That's exactly what I was saying. Yeah.
But yeah, but you said they and they've already
Meaning they-
expressed that they don't know who we are
Okay.
when we're on the mics. So I was just clarifying.
Okay.
they Jeremy it didn't show up.
So
All right,
back
so
to
go ahead.
you, because we could do this. We digress quite often. I just don't know the whole gamut of what you offer to your clients or their services, so to speak. So if you want to speak to that, so we could.
Yeah, basically I take away your obstacles, whatever they are, whether they're thought, whether they're actually real, whether they're something you hold in an emotional capacity. I just support people in taking those obstacles away, and we just pull them back very gently, or not, one
That's
at a time,
Okay.
until we get to the place where the only thing that you're standing in front of is your dream. Because the truth is, we're all dreaming all day long. And no
Okay.
matter what you're doing, you're creating. My business, or my work, if you would, is in the capacity to create. And as a human being, we have the capacity to create anything that we choose. So I help people do that. And I help them see their blind spots. So a lot of times we just can't see what it is.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
awesome. Yeah, and to that point, when we were so we did visit you. This is Larry. We did visit you, me and Corey, we talked for about an hour, and really we're just like, getting to know each other, and then we got into a little bit of
It was supposed to be a 10-minute or 20-minute. I felt
but then it was like,
and
yeah, let's just deep
think it
dive,
was
and then we're
like
like,
over an
oh,
hour.
I think we got to meet Jeremy somewhere, so we got to go. But
Jeremy made it for the beer. He did not make it.
So
I see.
to give
for
you
the
the
work.
They always-
I'm just.
I had my children.
let's not divert.
I had to
Let's
wait.
not divert.
No,
Jeremy.
you did that. You didn't bring open the.
Go ahead.
She's gonna get to our obstacles in a second. I'm just saying. No, go ahead. So when you say their dream, so if someone that comes to you, is it just, it could be they are struggling with something in their life, whether it's relationship, work, anything of that nature, just all the whole gamut of different things that they could bring to you?
Yeah, I think that there's 2 sides of this continuum that I really like to work on. And then there's everything in the middle. So for one, I like a big mess. So I probably shouldn't own that, but I really
That's
do.
us.
Oh, you're in the right
That's
place.
us. Yeah.
So if you've got a real big mess, and like grown-up people create messes, the more complex your life becomes, sometimes those complexities get, in the way of what you really are, right? Like my company is Authorized Love, so I believe that we are all unconditional love, walking around living this life, but it gets messy. And so when I clean up a mess with someone, they get to be completely and totally restored to the truth of who they are, who they were before the mess, who they would be in this moment. And in that place, they get great joy, great peace, better health, more sex, like all the things that you would expect a grown-up who is feeling embodied and whole to want. They make more money, they have more opportunities, they experience more joy. On the flip side of that, right?
I can see that.
On the flip side of that, I really like the dreamer, because the dreamer who has ambition and is in a driving capacity wants something but doesn't know why they can't have it. And in that way, I love to solve the puzzle.
Okay.
And so my skill set for both of those things is the same. The people in the middle who are on the fence,
That's us.
who
We're everything, I
you're
feel
not
like.
quite on the fence. You've hopped the fence.
Okay.
Okay.
For
All right.
sure you've
We're
hopped
stuck
the
on the
fence.
barbed wire. Sorry.
You're not in the barbed
no,
wire.
but
just
go
teasing.
ahead. Yeah.
But for the people that are in the middle who are living in some level of complacency, those people are probably not my client, because I'm not going to drag you over the fence unless you want me to, in which case then you already show that you have a desire to hop that fence. But if you're comfortable and it serves you and you're living well and don't want more or aren't curious, then what would we talk about? Because it really comes from a place where the person is driving this conversation. It isn't me driving. I'm the listener.
Does it drive you crazy when people are complacent?
No.
It drives me crazy.
Why?
Yeah. Why, Larry?
I feel maybe because I'm an idiot. no, seriously. I feel it's because like I just don't see myself wanting to be complacent ever, so I can't understand it. And that's being honest. Like I can't
think
understand.
That takes you off the fence, then, right? Because that would be that's where you are. As
Yeah, because like I just can't. Like I feel like I always have to be learning something or doing something, because otherwise I just I don't feel right.
I think complacency can offer rest. So I have a respect for it.
Don't get me wrong. I enjoy my
okay.
days when I'm just kind of like, when people tell me they're like, oh, I'm bored. Like to me, I'm like, I don't ever think that. But when I don't have anything to do that day, I do feel good, but I don't feel bored. Does that make sense?
Do you think subconsciously people kind of put themselves into complacency because they need the rest? Do you think that happens?
I think sometimes people work too hard for the basics, meaning they're working for love. They're working for their wholeness. They're working to accept themselves. And when they're doing all of that internally, the idea of external growth is frightening. And so to stay safe, they do things that are comforting. And in the comfort, you find complacency. So what happens for me is that I just see that and say, I see you. I understand where you are. And at any moment, that could change. And if that changes, then that's someone that probably wants to talk to me. But me, who sounds really calm right now and collected, with you, who is complacent, could actually be more damaging than it would be helpful, because we're not going to stay where we are. We're going to start this conversation one place, but beyond the conversation, you are very likely to not be the same ever again. And if you're not willing to do that, be in a place where you're open and something can be different tomorrow or 2 minutes from now, you're not going to like me very much. Like, it just wouldn't be a good fit energetically. Does that make sense?
That makes sense, because sometimes they need to be in that moment and stay there for a little bit longer.
I kind of, to Larry's point, it doesn't necessarily drive me nuts when somebody's complacent. It drives me nuts.
I guess I just don't get it.
I get it. It drives me nuts when somebody's complacent but wants more.
Or complains.
Yeah, that I think it goes back to that whole quote, most men live lives of quiet desperation, where they want more, but they're just complacent in what they're doing. That drives me nuts, because I feel like there's no reset button. I say it all the time. I'm like a broken record. Like, I don't get there's no redo at this. Like, this is it. Like, do it now. Don't do it tomorrow. Like, figure it out. Don't be complacent if you want more. Now, if you don't want more, if you are perfectly happy making sandwiches at Publix and that is your joy, then absolutely do that. I want you to do that.
But that's not complacent.
No, it's
That's
not.
content
Yes.
or satisfied.
Yeah.
Okay.
And you're allowed to be that.
Yeah.
That's a
Yes,
good point.
absolutely.
Hey, that's a
Yeah.
great point. That's something that I don't think maybe I have a problem, right?
I think you're
We
not
all
doing
have
enough.
problems. Though. I think we all have.
Well,
some
I'm
level
saying
of a
because
problem
to
or
your
an
point, I
obstacle
mean,
that we
if they're
have.
content, then at what point, right? At that, and maybe this become a therapy session, but at what point
Again.
do I become content, right? Like as far as family, I'm very content. Work, maybe not, right? I feel like I have a great job. I do have a great job. I work for great people, but obviously I'm doing something else, but it's because this interests me.
But I think it goes back to what Danielle said. Is like kind of like that means you're in a good place, but you also are wanting more. So that's an okay thing.
Yeah, that's just being on the growth line. Like you get to decide when the more happens. You get to decide what more looks like. You get to decide if the more you've created, which is also possible, is not the thing you want. I have plenty of answered prayers that I was like, oh God, why? Why
Right.
would I have prayed that prayer? Like, why did I actually ask for that? Because once I got it,
You're like,
I
oh,
had to experience what I was asking for, and it was like not anything like what I thought it would be.
And that's so hard to
Interesting.
deal with in the moment because you think this is the thing that you want so bad. Like you want it. And so when you don't get it, you get that frustration level of trying to get there and it doesn't happen. So, and then after it doesn't happen, you have to kind
or
of go
does
through
happen, then you're like,
Yeah, it
why?
could go either way.
Why did I do this?
Well,
And I
see,
think
this is what I've learned over the years because the way I say it is like I didn't know that the answer to my prayers would be nothing that I wanted. And yet I now know that I have the capacity to create. So when I was putting it in an external, ideology, meaning like somebody is delivering this thing to me and I'm asking for it and I get it, then I feel compelled to be grateful for it in a way that means I can't change it. But what I learned is that as a creator, which we all are, that if I don't like it, I can erase it. I can redo it. I can create something new. I can, like children, abandon the drawing and move into a new coloring book. Like there's literally no place you can be in your life where you don't get the opportunity to choose to create something different. So knowing that now, I'm free to, quote unquote, like pray the prayer, ask for the thing, experience it, and then while I'm in it, say, not exactly what I was thinking. So where would that leave me? What else would I want? And in that place, I'm open to continuous growth, which I think is another great place to be because every day I get the opportunity to ask, is this what I want? And if it's not, then I create it.
Yeah. See, like for me personally, I could say where it stems from me. Basically, I have a great job. However, everything becomes stale, right? At some point, they may not need me anymore. They may not want me anymore. So I'm always trying to figure out the next step for me. So that's where I'm at mentally, always like, all right, so if this doesn't go, then should I be doing programming? Should I not be doing programming? Should I be doing something different? Should I, go back on the road? So just trying to always sharpen my tools, if you will, and or doing something different and just learning from folks from just like this podcast, right? I mean, we're having really interesting people on these podcasts, and there hasn't been one person that's been on that I honestly haven't taken something back and been like, that's really interesting. Like, that's a really good way to think about X.
Yeah, so if I could make a suggestion for you in terms of how to play the game of life, you are playing not to lose.
Always.
You could be playing to win.
Oh, yeah.
When you talk about having stuff that works for you that's, pretty good, really good, keeping you in some level of safety or the idea of safety and not wanting to disrupt that, but wondering what's more, you're playing not to lose. And then when you switch games and you start playing to win, the questions are no longer, what would I do to keep what I have, but rather, what do I want? And when you ask yourself, what do you want, and it starts answering you, you get the opportunity to honor those choices, maybe perhaps like the podcast. A function of what do I want? Well, I'm bored, or I want to do something that's more connecting me to more people, something that makes me feel more creative, something that wakes me up and says, you know, hey, I'm going to do great today, but at the end of the day, I have this enlivening experience. And so what you know, or what you can come to know, is that that can be the way everything happens all day, including the way you go to your job. So if you go to your job playing to win and not to lose, you really don't know what's possible for you there, because the truth is you're creating that as well.
Agreed. Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that.
I'm a processor, so I'm taking
Yeah.
a lot in right now. I like it. I like it. No, I really do.
Well, because even when you said that, Larry, that's what I took from it as well. When he was talking about that it's you're making defensive actions instead of offensive.
I'm always trying to think ahead.
Yeah.
Always.
But are you
But I
thinking
can't
ahead
stop.
defensively or offensively, though?
Offensively.
See, because when you were saying it to me, it sounded like it was defense. Like you were like, if this happens, then I'll have this.
See, but I feel like I'm being offensive in the sense that I'm always sharpening my tools and getting it ready in case if I need to do something different.
Yeah.
Well,
That's how
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but that's just my take.
This is all offense on the podcast.
I
Very offensive.
Yeah.
well, I would challenge you to create in the present moment,
Okay.
because the reality that you have is created right here in this moment. There is no reality beyond this moment
Agreed.
until that moment shows up.
And then it's a new reality.
That's right. And anything that's happened in the past has come and gone, and it actually has no power or authority unless we pull up the file and reread it.
And we as humans hold on to that stuff and let it kind of reread it without even knowing sometimes that we're rereading it in the now reality. We're reading the past and letting it affect the current reality.
Right. We're memorized.
Yeah.
We live in the memorization of what we think we know. And all your power is in what you do not know and what is possible right now.
I heard you speak to you said you pray in an external ideology. So do you have like a certain religious belief, or are you more kind of open to multiple things? Like what is your view there with you have clients? Do you share that with your clients, or is that something you keep to yourself?
No, I'm a minister of spiritual consciousness. So for me, my belief system is based on universal law and principle. You'll find it in every religion. You'll find it even amongst those who do not believe in a religion, because universal law, like the law of gravity, is just a law that says, in very simple terms, we are what we think, that we are cause and effect. And we take cause, I take cause. When I say pray, I become the cause of initiating communication to something that is larger than me, and that can be for some people defined as God, that can be for some people the universe, it can be for some people life and love itself. And so for me, it's a neutral experience with my clients in support of whatever supports them.
Okay.
Right?
So for everybody, there's their own source, if you will, that brings that piece to them. Okay.
While we were at Danielle's office, she did give us some homework.
Now we probably butchered this.
Yes, me and Larry spent some time on the phone back and forth about this, and we discussed it shortly with Jeremy as well.
Shortly.
We did.
Shortly.
We don't want to give him too much insight. He didn't put in the work, so it is what it is.
So we
We
talked about
the same
that.
amount of work that you
Danielle.
have.
We talked about the podcast.
Yeah.
And we talked about what is a podcast and what it may not be. And so Danielle challenged us to come up with 5 goals of the podcast.
And then
And-
the
and
opposite
so-
of 5 goals.
So
Is
kinda-
that-
Did I get that? Did we get that right?
I thought it was.
No.
No.
Oh,
I was gonna say, and I was gonna
my
say,
God.
I feel like I knew you didn't get it right.
I immediately called Larry and I was like, "This doesn't sound right to me."
By the way, he didn't do
Listen,
that. I appreciate the storytelling, but go ahead.
listen. I said Larry's a very gray person. We just had this discussion.
Oh, we did have this discussion today.
There's not a black and white with Larry. He's like, "Oh yeah, it'll be fine," and I'm like, "Are you sure these mics are gonna work?" "Oh yeah, it'll be fine," and then they don't work.
But aren't you? Did you
And
say you're also a? Gray
I'm
area?
also a
Okay.
very gray area person.
Just so you know, Corey was there too.
Yes, I was.
I appreciate you
Yes.
bringing this on me.
Yes.
As if you weren't even there. Were you with Jeremy? What is going on here? I need
was
to
there,
understand.
but I was obviously confused.
We'll get him back in a
So,
second, Danielle.
I was
will.
obviously confused. So
Okay.
when I call Larry and say, "What are we supposed to do again?" And then he said,
All right, let's do this live.
Let's back up and let her say it. I bet I can.
Let's do this
figure it
live.
out at
wait.
least.
Let me explain what we actually did, because we put in some work, worthless work by the sounds of it.
I don't think it's worthless. I'm
Yeah.
very curious to see
Okay.
what it was.
Were
I'm
we not
sure
supposed to
it
do
was-
something and then write down the opposite of that something?
Yes, that is true.
That is true.
What is it not supposed to be goals?
No, it's not specific to goals. I think what we talked about, I know what we talked about,
Okay.
is
She's much more professional than we are.
I've just been doing this a long time. So what I know we talked about is taking a goal. And so let's just say, for example, we were thinking about the podcast being able to support 3 grown adults,
Yeah.
right? So if that comes up and the answer is, I don't think so. I'm not sure if that's going to happen. I don't see how that could work. We would want to do a thorough investigation of the thoughts and beliefs that support the idea why it wouldn't work. So we would look at all of the negative thoughts. See, when we talk about creating, we're talking about the 0 possibility and the 100%, right?
Mm-hmm.
So instead of trying to force yourself to believe from 0 to 100 that tomorrow you all could be podcasting all day, every day.
That would be so much fun.
That's amazing.
It took you like 20 minutes to admit that when we were together. I'm just saying.
I wish I'd have been there. I could've-
You would have called them out.
No, he
well, no,
wouldn't.
I took longer than they did. I was the last one on board.
Yeah,
that's the truth.
He's,
And sometimes
he's
I'm
still not 100%
I feel like
on
I'm
board.
still questioned all the time.
Yes.
And it's not that I don't love this. 'cause
He's
this
not
is
100% on board. Yeah.
Danielle, do you feel like I get bullied a little bit? I'm curious if this is just me here or
This is
It's just
and
you.
That's Larry talking.
there's an issue we need to identify. I'm just saying.
All
Anyway,
right.
back to
Inequality
you.
of
Yeah, it's about
casters.
No. Oh.
So the purpose of this exercise, in case you're actually going to try this at home kind of thing, is to identify something that you want. And when you identify that thing that you want to play in the realm of possibility. And the reason you want to do that is because force-feeding yourself an idea from 0 to 100 creates instant resistance. When you have resistance, you are so unlikely to do anything to move yourself closer to the goal that it just sits idle. So what I asked you guys to do was to come up with like no less than, I mean, if you're really my client, you'd be doing like 50.
Whoa.
So 5 is a nice try, but 50.
I like
I have one now.
Take that, you two.
We are so
Five-
worth- Hey,
five
I did write down
podcasts.
something good though that you've already spoke about. So I was like, I thought I was killing it. Now, not
No.
so much.
Go
But
ahead.
here's the thing, right? Like the perfect example is that what we take in is reflective of what level of resistance we have.
Okay.
So if this was the only thing you had to do, I'm making this up, but I'm
Yeah.
really not, because this exercise has made me tens of thousands of dollars, and it actually brings my clients more than that. So I know that what I'm telling you is a life-changing experience if you're ready for it. So if the 50 thoughts that say anything from it's not possible, I can't do it, the kids won't have clothes, my wife will be unhappy, I might fail, my work needs me, I'm not smart enough, it doesn't feel right, I feel scared, I'm going to be broke, it'll fall flat. Like those are just ideas, right? So I'm pulling out like made up.
That would be on the list of 50, if you will.
Right,
Anything that pops in your mind
exactly.
that could go, okay.
Right, but you want
Got
to
you.
do an exhaustive list of every reason, turning over every like tile to see what would really have me believe that I can't have this. And then once you do that, you don't embellish the other side of it, you just suggest the opposite. I can't do this becomes I can do this. It won't pay me becomes it will pay me.
Oh, you guys did this ass backwards.
Yeah. 100%.
We're so wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go
It
ahead,
was
continue.
horrible.
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
No,
Yeah.
that's fine, because this is again like a great example of what happens when we're not really hearing, right? What is in
I was
front of
misremembering.
us. I was going to send you guys the video that I have
Oh
on how
my
to do it.
God.
And
So
I was
Danielle,
like, no,
I feel like
trust
just
they were
in this
listening.
moment we're having this conversation and let's
No,
but I think this would be a good
We
one for
did-
us to do
We did do it
off the
but-
podcast, but maybe have some content with it, like to really show the process
Yes,
behind us.
because here's what
doing
we
this.
did.
I think
We
it's pretty
did-
empowering.
We did the thoughts.
We did it We did it way backwards.
Yeah, it was pretty much backwards. We did what we wanted the podcast to be.
And then the opposite of
And what the opposite would look like. And
Yes.
sometimes
Okay.
sometimes that is the current.
Yeah. Well,
So what did you come up with?
like what we want the podcast to be. I've had this open. I haven't been reading text messages. I just didn't want it to shut off and lose my place in my notes. I'm showing her my phone right now. I didn't want her to think I was rude.
So what would you want?
It's okay.
To be inspirational and entertaining. And then the opposite of that is not to be, you know?
Right. Which is actually a good finding.
And then I had to be able to operate the podcast full time. And then the opposite of that is the podcast would die or end. Then I had to give back to the community through the podcast. And I have the opposite of that as to only take, but that's not really, I have a question mark next to that because that's not necessarily true, because just because I'm not giving back through the podcast doesn't mean I'm not able to give back to the community another way.
It also means that it's not a direct opposite.
Yeah.
You could actually just say, what's the statement you made?
To give back to the community through the podcast.
So then you could say to not give back to the community through the podcast.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which doesn't diminish it.
Yeah.
Either way, right?
To build meaningful and lasting relationships. And again, that's kind of like, I wouldn't be using the podcast to build meaningful and lasting relationships, but that would be the goal, to use the podcast. But it's kind of podcast specific, because I feel like if I wasn't doing the podcast, I would still be building meaningful and lasting relationships.
But I think the podcast opens up other doors to
more
meet
doors.
New people. Through the people that we interview, we get new names,
Yeah.
and we get to meet new people that we would have never probably crossed paths
We
with.
would never have, no.
The other thing about it is that when you look at the list that you did come up with, you uncover these ideas that the podcast has to be something more or something less than what you think it is. So it doesn't really get to be whatever it is. So if you have an idea that it has to give back to the community, and you were inspired by your energy, right, by your own selves to create this thing, and it was intended for the podcast to give back to you, with a focus on it giving back to the community, you may not be able to see that the very right thing to do would be to create a channel of revenue through the podcast. Can you see how like that changes the entire line of thinking? And that's why you do it. So you did do the work. I mean, when you look at the work, you're doing it because you want to have a full investigation of the kind of thoughts that would stop it from actually manifesting.
And then my last one was to have more moments of joy, because I feel like, again, we have only X number of minutes on this earth. So the more we fill with joy, the better our lives are. For me, I feel like, I know there's moments in this life that aren't going to be filled with joy for whatever those circumstances arise. But to me, the podcast brings joy to me. Not just I want to be happy. It's true joy.
Yeah, and if you taking that off of the podcast, then you come to the place where you bring joy.
Yeah.
So if you are the joy and you bring it to the podcast itself has no pressure to perform for you.
Yeah.
In which case it leaves you wide open to the kind of inspiration, the kind of teaching, the kind of conversation. I mean, I think I challenged you guys to actually look at conversations that make you uncomfortable and say, what are the questions that the $1 million podcasters would ask that you would not?
We have some coming up.
Yes.
Yeah, but that's the kind of, that's the place where that's the growth.
Yeah.
Because when the podcast becomes a vehicle for you, for what I call love in all of its forms, then you do have to surrender your ideas of what you think it should do, what you think it should look like, and be open to the inspiration itself, which is the podcast, right? Like, and then it begins to drive and it begins to speak to you through your own thoughts, through your own hunches, your intuition, your feelings, your gut, through relationships with people, right? Like this passing of person to person who bring you a new person.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that is the podcast speaking back to you. And then you become someone who's in relationship with this beautiful thing that you've created, and it starts guiding you rather than you directing it. And in that case, we have no idea how amazing and wonderful this could be. But our brain tells us that it can't be. however you got there, just looking at those thoughts are limiting thoughts.
Yeah.
And so we open space for stuff to happen, for things to come in, for more love to reveal itself by turning those thoughts into possibility.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So those were Corey's 5 goals. Here's mine. So mine, it's very similar to what Corey had, but is to grow an audience, to help and share good, inspiring stories. That's honestly what I want to get out of this.
We didn't write these down together either.
No, actually, I did it at my house. He did it here. Be authentic and be myself. That's what I always want to be, because I don't know. So all right, so let me go back. For the first goal, for the grow audience and to help share good, inspiring stories, the opposite would be to do nothing, right? Because I feel like whether I'm at home and I'm having a conversation, whether it's with my wife or with my friends or whoever, I feel like it should always be a good, inspiring story. Even if I'm just like joking around and having fun, like to me, that could be inspiring, right? Number 2, my second goal was be authentic and be myself, and the opposite would be to be fake. So that's the opposite. Again, I did this all wrong, but this is what we have. So learn from others. That's also what I want to get out of this podcast, because we are interviewing great people. Like I'm getting a lot out of this conversation, by the way. So I appreciate that. So learning from others, I'm hoping to learn out of this conversation. And so my opposite for that would be to discount and not be open-minded, right? So if I just shut down, I'm like, they're wrong. I should always be thinking in the future, then I could obviously be that, but that would be my opposite. The other goal is to be entertaining, which kind of ties into the first goal, because otherwise, if we're not entertaining, we're not going to be growing any audiences, because it's going to be boring, right? Which is my opposite would be to be dull. So last but not least, take action, because I want to take action on certain things, right? So if we are getting out there and we're trying to figure out different ways of doing. So if we have a guest on, we're thinking about like, and you tell me to do something, my goal is to take action of some sort and just be a better person, right? How can I grow? How can I, maybe just ties into what I said from the very beginning, but that's how I always take it. And then last but not least, the opposite is to do nothing. So those are my 5 goals that I have, and that's the opposite.
So when you look at those goals and you think about, and you can just think about it later if you want, but when you think about what you really want, I think that there's a level of, we all do this, but there's a level of dishonesty when we hang out in it's for everyone else and I get a little bit. It's for everyone else and I get to be the one who, helped make it happen. It's for everyone else, meaning the entertainment, the joy, the inspiration. I get a little inspiration myself. But that typically means you haven't truly aligned yourself with why you really want to do this. Because on the surface, those things are the niceties that we've been conditioned to express. And for some people, it's clear that they have to do something. They get to a place where it's just like you can't stop them. Like it has to come through them, right? Like they're compelled at a very deep level to do whatever it is. And I have no judgment on what it is that, people are creating. I have clients that do all different things in all different industries. But the why you want to experience the inspiration is typically, or be inspiring, is usually kind of fluffy. And usually kind of, and I'm not diminishing that that's what you all want to do or that some of you want to do, but even for myself, if I have to get real about why I do what I do, why I wake up and I say, no matter what today looks like, I'm going to authorize love. I'm going to put my concepts to the test today in my real life. It is absolutely so that I can stand in the truth of who I am. It is absolutely, like if I help another person, fabulous. And if I don't, I matter. I matter so much. Just like you matter, and you matter, and you matter. And you get to matter that much. And when you do to yourself, the work that you produce has to help others. It has to magnify. It has to multiply. Because there's no way that we can be love in physical form and feel so deeply connected to that truth that it is not going to amplify love when you walk in the room, when you create and host a space for someone else to show up and to have a voice. That's powerful stuff. I mean, that you guys are not really playing, we're having fun, and I think that it's cool,
Right.
and I'm not diminishing that it should be fun and joyful and inspiring, but like get into the idea that there is a part of you that wants it. And when you identify with that part that wants it and you let that part come forward, you play a different game. It is just an entirely different game.
So what do you tell the person that's very black and white, who it's like an all or nothing type thing where, like myself, I'm very black or white. And so for me, it's very easy. I find myself where I see it because I'm on this side. If I'm on this side and I see it's the total opposite of the spectrum, I'm like, that's really far away. Where in the gray area, they live in the middle and it's kind of, it's right there and I can go this way and that way. But for me, that's just my personality. So I'm always like, I find myself, not just in this per se, but just in other things in life, backing into a comfort zone. And you say like trying to get you out of your comfort zone, which you try to do, but I find myself subconsciously backing into that comfort zone. And then you have to kind of battle yourself to say, no, move forward.
So when a person is black and white, there are two options that are really readily available. One, that person is going to quantum leap like nobody else. Because if I have a way of having a conversation with you and you can go from black to white and white becomes visible, doable, gettable, havable, you will leap faster than any person in the gray. You will have it first.
Okay.
Right?
Sure.
Once it becomes white, it's yours.
Yeah.
If you're on the black side and you want it and it's white, you will go for it. What you don't have in your favor in the moment is evidence. So what we do is we open a new file. And I have no interest in filling that file. I let life do that for you based on, again, we just mostly do it through conversation, home assignments, like working on things where your evidence becomes so compelling, you can't say no to it because it's self-generated. If I give you a list of 1,000 reasons why, they're my reasons. They don't help you go from 0 to 100. But your life will give you feedback based on a new set of input, right? Like a computer will spit out something else if you put something different in. It's the same for you. Your personality is memorized. It's not fixed.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I like it.
Yeah.
Quantum leap.
So really quickly, Danielle, you've also authored how many books?
One.
And then you co-authored, right? Or just one?
One.
Okay.
Oh, because I
kids.
published, right.
With the kids.
So I published,
Yes.
I was the publisher of a book of 16 second graders at
Yes.
Beachland
Oh,
Elementary.
gotcha.
So I spent
Cool.
4 months with them teaching them how to publish, how to write and illustrate their own book, and I published it. So yes, but I didn't write that book. I facilitated it. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
All right. Now, what is the name of that book?
My Very Best Day.
And folks can buy it on Amazon?
Yeah.
Okay. My
and
Very
what was
Best
the name
Day.
of your book?
I met God in a nightclub. The Unconventional
Wait.
Truth.
Say the title again.
I met God in a nightclub. The Unconventional Truth.
I feel like there's a really deep story there. I got to get
Is
the book.
that on Amazon as well?
It is.
Okay. And where can they find you at?
AuthorizeLove.com.
Okay. And
Well-
you're
well-
local in Bureau here, right?
I do. I'm local now. I actually just opened an office last month on 17th Street. So I can go back to seeing people in person and having dynamic conversations and
Like this one.
like this one.
This is a good conversation.
I
Yeah.
love conversation.
We do too.
Appreciate it.
And Instagram, Facebook?
Yes, all Authorized Love.
Okay.
Awesome.
See,
Well,
look,
listen,
she's all
Danielle.
over. She got them all to be the same name.
Yeah, Danielle.
much for
yeah,
us.
yeah. We definitely think you're an extraordinary person.
We have one final question for you. Based on your life experiences, what is one piece of advice you feel like you can impart onto our listeners?
Be here right now. Everything you want everything you think you need is actually available to you right now. And the sooner you will slow down and allow yourself to see something different, you will have those things.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Definitely
Thank you so
appreciate it,
much.
for sure.
You were awesome.
Thank you.
guys.
It's incredible.
Guys, we appreciate you listening. If you guys got any questions, comments, or concerns, you can get us at fullgorillalife@gmail.com. Make sure you share our stuff on social media.
And if you want to see what's going on social media, you can find us Instagram and Facebook at Full Gorilla Life and on Twitter at Gorilla Full, like beautiful, but with a gorilla.
And please visit our website, fullgorilla.life. And please do not forget to hit subscribe on your podcast app of choice. Adios.
Later.
Take care.